You ever get that feeling online, that little niggle, wondering if the person you're interacting with is more real?
Hmm, yeah. That question feels more relevant than ever sometimes.
Exactly. And today we're diving into a situation that really brings that home. It's about an unauthorized experiment that happened on the #ChangeMyView subreddit.
Ah, yes, that story. It's quite something. It really touches on research ethics in these online spaces.
It does. So our mission today is to unpack what went down, why it's a big deal, and what it might mean for, how we all interact online.
Good plan. And maybe we should quickly explain for Change My View for anyone who hasn't come across it.
Good point. So basically, it's a Reddit community where users post views they hold, but they're explicitly open to having those views challenged. The whole point is discussion, maybe even changing your mind.
It's built on a foundation of, let's say, good faith debate. People expect genuine arguments from other people.
Which is why this experiment is so, well, jarring. What happened was researchers from the University of Zurich secretly used AI-generated comments.
Right. They were trying to see if AI could actually persuade people, change their views on the platform, without telling the users, obviously.
Yeah, the secrecy is key. We're talking about AI jumping into these debates, trying to shift opinions.
And immediately, that throws up red flags around consent, transparency, all the things you'd hope for in, well, any interaction, but especially online research.
Totally. And it gets deeper. It wasn't just generic AI comments. There's this element of deception using personal info. It's quite concerning.
Definitely raises serious ethical questions.
So for our deep dive, we've got a couple of main sources. There's the post from the actual Change My View moderators where they laid out what they discovered.
Right, the community perspective.
And then there's a news article that summarizes everything and crucially includes responses from the university and from Reddit itself.
Okay, so we get the community reaction and the sort of institutional and platform level view. Should be interesting to compare.
Definitely. Let's start with that moderator post. How did they find out?
Well, apparently the researchers contacted the moderators after the experiment had already been running for months.
Wow.
Yeah. Basically saying, hey, we've been doing this thing with AI. We know it breaks your rules about bots and disclosing AI, but
But our research is super important.
that seems to be the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah.
They argued the insights into AI persuasion were kind of vital for society.
Mm.
And they mentioned their university's IRB, that's the Institutional Review Board, the ethics committee, had supposedly approved the study.
Okay, that's a big claim. But what exactly did the IRB approve? Because the moderators described some really worrying stuff about how the AI worked.
Right. This is where it gets particularly tricky. It wasn't just generating arguments.
No, it was apparently analyzing users' posting histories across Reddit.
Trying to figure out things like, demographics, maybe political leanings, personal details.
And then using that to tailor the AI's comments.
Exactly. Personalizing the persuasion attempt based on inferred characteristics. Without consent, of course.
That feels like a completely different level of intervention than just testing general arguments.
It absolutely is. One thing is studying persuasion in the abstract. Quite another is targeting individuals using their scraped personal data.
And some of the examples the mods gave, they're pretty disturbing.
Yeah, they really are. It wasn't just debating policy points.
No. The mods mentioned the AI simulating being a rape victim in one instance.
Wow.
And acting like a trauma counselor in another. And even taking on specific, sometimes controversial identities.
Like pretending to be a black man, arguing against Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, or posing as a Palestinian, expressing extreme views, and then sort of challenging the definition of genocide.
Okay, that's incredibly problematic. You're not just deceiving people. You're potentially causing real harm, dealing with incredibly sensitive topics using fake personas.
It's hard to square that with the researchers' initial assessment, which the mods mentioned, that the experiment caused minimal harm.
Minimal harm. Given those examples, that seems optimistic, to put it mildly, especially when users might have real trauma related to those topics.
Understandably, the moderators were furious. They filed an ethics complaint directly with the University of Zurich.
Demanding answers, right? And an apology.
Yes, and they explicitly asked that the research not be published. They questioned how the IRB could have okayed this in the first place.
And they pointed out something else important too, didn't they? About the methodology changing.
They did. Apparently, the researchers initially planned maybe more general values-based arguments, but then shifted to these highly personalized, sometimes inflammatory tactics.
Without going back for another ethics review for that change.
Exactly, which raises huge questions about oversight.
Yeah, that's a major red flag in research ethics. If your methods change significantly, especially in ways that increase risk, you generally need to get that reapproved.
So how did the university respond? The news article shed some light here.
Well, they acknowledged it was serious. They said the lead researcher received a formal warning.
Okay, so some action was taken.
But their initial public statement, reported in the news, also seemed to, well, echo the researchers a bit. They suggested that while rules were broken, the harm seemed little.
Little harm again.
Yeah, and that the potential insights from the research might still be valuable, maybe even enough to justify publication eventually.
That initial response feels a bit like prioritizing the research findings over the clear ethical breaches and the community's reaction.
It certainly points to that tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The drive for knowledge versus the responsibility to participants and communities.
Thankfully, it didn't stop there. Reddit got involved too.
Right, the platform itself. What did they say?
Reddit's legal team came out swinging. Their chief legal officer called the experiment deeply wrong on both a moral and legal level. Strong words.
Okay, so no ambiguity there.
None. They said it violated Reddit's user agreement, banned all the accounts linked to the researchers,
Yeah.
and stated they were pursuing formal legal action with the university.
Wow, okay. That's significant. It sends a pretty clear message from the platform that this kind of thing isn't acceptable. Protects the users, protects the platform's integrity.
Absolutely. And then there was an update from the moderators later on.
Oh yeah, what was that?
They reported that the researchers had contacted them again and basically said they no longer plan to seek publication for the study.
Ah, so ultimately the findings won't be published. That's probably a good outcome, given everything. Likely influenced by the backlash and legal threats, perhaps.
You have to assume so, yeah. But it is a positive step, recognizing the severity of the concerns.
Definitely. But it doesn't erase the fact that the experiment happened. The ethical lines were crossed, and people in that community were unknowingly subjected to it.
Absolutely. And the fallout within changemyview, and I guess more broadly, is real. People feeling betrayed, worried.
Understandably. If researchers can do this, who else might be manipulating conversations online? It erodes trust.
It really does. It forces us to ask, how do we balance research needs with protecting people online, especially as AI gets more sophisticated?
That's the core challenge, isn't it? Applying ethical principles like informed consent and minimizing harm in these complex digital environments. It's not always straightforward, but it's essential.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the key points from this deep dive.
Right, so University of Zurich researchers ran a secret AI experiment on changemyview.
They used AI comments, personalized based on user history, to try and change opinions, breaking subreddit rules.
Some of those AI comments took on really sensitive, potentially harmful personas like trauma victims or specific identity groups.
The moderators found out, filed an ethics complaint, and asked the research not be published.
Reddit condemned it strongly, banned the accounts, and pursued legal action.
The university initially downplayed the harm while acknowledging the seriousness and issuing a warning to the researcher.
But importantly, the researchers later stated they won't seek publication for the findings.
And the whole thing just raises massive ethical red flags about consent, potential harm, and respecting online communities.
It really does underscore how traditional research ethics need careful thought and, frankly, strict application when we move into online spaces. You can't just treat online communities as free-for-all labs.
So thinking about all this, now that you know this happened, how does it maybe change how you look at online discussions? And what responsibility do platforms to researchers have to maintain trust and, ethical behavior online?
Big questions.
Could this be happening elsewhere, undetected? And what does that mean for online discourse, for research, especially with AI getting smarter all the time?
Definitely gives you a lot to think about long after this conversation ends.
It certainly does. Thanks for digging into this with us today.